Hello and welcome to 10 Lessons Learned, the podcast where we talk to leaders, experts, and extraordinary individuals from all over the world to uncover the lessons that have shaped their lives, their careers, and perhaps their business. The goal of our program is very simple: making the world a little wiser, one lesson at a time. My name is Siebe Vanderzee and I'm your host. Our guest today is the Honorable Leela Aheer. Leela Aheer is a well-known Canadian politician in the province of Alberta. She is a former Minister of Culture, Multiculturalism and Status of Women, and she is also a musician and a successful entrepreneur. Leela is the Chief Growth Officer at the BioSport, leading the development of personalized training, nutrition and recovery strategies. She also serves as Senior Director of Strategy and Partnerships with BioAero, a leader in precision health and longevity medicine. She is a strong vocal advocate against female genital mutilation, FGM, and this aligns with Leela's broader advocacy for women's rights, bodily autonomy, and gender equality. You can learn a lot more about Leela Aheer on our website, 10lessonslearned.com. Hello, Leela. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm so well. Thank you so much for having me on this beautiful podcast. And I love this format. I'm actually really excited. Thank you so much.
It's really an honor to have you. And of course, I was able to look at your background. It's fascinating, your experience in entrepreneurship, but also in politics. And if I can ask you for a start, what motivated you to get involved in politics in Canada?
My dad came from India in 1962. My mom's a third generation Canadian. And as we walked through life, I was always activated by so many different things. And honestly, it found me. I wish I could tell you I went out and was motivated and was doing all these things. I'd been door knocking for so many people my whole life. I always wanted to be invested in the people that were doing the work, because being elected is hard. And I thank everybody for their service in this space, whether I agree with them or not. But it was really, I didn't really have a lot of control over how this happened. And you have to ride the wave of your own life at times. And then once I was in the thick of things, once I understood, it was my chance to give back to this country and this province that have given me so much. I was compelled, actually. Once I got over I was feeling like imposter syndrome, for, like, who the heck am I for trying this kind of thing? But once you get past that initial phase and those concerns, you really find that there's 1,000 ways that you can give back and participate in a meaningful way. So that's my why. It continues to be my why. It's why I'll always be involved in some way or the other.
Now, obviously, being involved in politics takes up a lot of your time. Being an entrepreneur, working with at least 2 companies, as far as I can see, how are you going to combine that in the future when you have perhaps other opportunities in politics?
I'm a very happy, busy person. You and I were talking about this earlier. You have to read the room and see where the opportunities are and how. I think when you're facilitating your life through how can I help, if that's the first question that you ask, the opportunities that will present before you will be the ones where you can answer the question, how I can help, right?
Yeah.
So I think that I've always ridden that line really closely, like it's razor thin edge, right? Of and you can relate to this too, of appropriate versus maybe a little bit more provocative. And I think that's where you get respect from. You earn it, right? Because you're respecting people enough to tell your truth, even when it hurts. Those are the kinds of things that I think, despite whatever opportunities I may or may not have in the future, those principal parts of who I am at the core will always be leading those directionally, whether that's private sector or whether that's government, or like you as an honorary consul general. There's so many things we can do, but we have to be willing to speak out at times. And as I was going through, the most profound thing about going through these 10 lessons was figuring out how much hypocrisy I had in my own life, My lessons contradict each other, but I think that's life, isn't it?
We're going to be talking about that. I think that's interesting, but I'm also curious, your interest in, let's say, women's issues, women's rights, FGM, those are, I would imagine, ongoing issues. It's not to say, okay, I'm done, I'm finished, it's over.
No, you're constantly you're constantly working at
it. Is that part of your motivation as well? Women's rights and issues
100%.
related? Yeah. Yeah.
100%. If there comes a time in my lifetime where I don't have to talk about it anymore, nobody will be happier than me.
Well said.
Uh, the purpose of this is not to undermine men or not to undermine different ethnicities, races, whatever. It's not about that because we all have our own growth and we're going to have mistakes along the way. There's not a single culture out there that hasn't used their strength and capacity at some time to rule over another, whether that's gender or whether that's culture. That is a profoundly interesting thing that ties all of us globally in that space. The one thing I just can't seem to get my head around is why there's still gender disparities. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Women are going to be close to 52% of the population. We have a very, and I can't speak for every woman, obviously, but when we're looking at like Western democracies and where we have capacity and access to all of these things, to have to still march for my rights seems ludicrous to me, but it will never end until I truly believe that we all understand the autonomy over these temples that were given by God, by whatever you believe in, these beautiful bodies that we're in to be able to create and make things and innovate and have these brains to be able to do these things. I will be constantly trying to use my brain, trying to use that elasticity to push myself, but also push all of us to feel empowered, to have agency, right? These are the things. And the minute that you take a person's agency away from them, not only do you demean and their power of who they are, but there is there's a nefarious power that is underneath that that can be used for 1,000 different things. And that's what always concerns me, isn't so much that some people want to give power over. That's fine. That's your prerogative and your decision. But there's a lot of people who don't, but have to because of the nature of the world that they're living in at this point. And we can't fix everything. It's not in business where we have to work with different governments, with different spaces, with everything, and be on understanding and acknowledge that people are going to have different priorities and different ideologies than maybe what we have here. That's the privilege of living in a Western democracy, is that diplomacy has to lead the discussion. It doesn't mean you can't stand up. Absolutely, you should be standing up. But again, the interesting dichotomy is reading the room and understanding when to be silent, when to speak, when to understand. I'll share one little story with you just to give some context. When I was first elected in 2015, there was a lot of people who didn't vote for me. I only won by 260 votes. And it's just because I really hustled. We worked really hard on that campaign. And a lot of the people from different cultures in my riding didn't vote for me, even though I represented the culture. And afterwards, they were more interested in maybe speaking to my husband because he spoke their language and all of that. And my husband got really ruffled, going, "No, my wife is the one who won this election. You need to speak to her." And I took my husband's hand. I said, "Sweetie," I said, "I'm not offended." I said, "Culturally," I said, "maybe it's really difficult for people to understand my position. So why don't we earn their trust? Let's have tea, let's talk, let's get into the core issues of what's happening here instead of taking it personally. I don't need to fight every battle." And then there was times when you have to fight battles like FGM, female genital mutilation. Oof, that was a battle. Human trafficking, 14 years of my life
Wow.
going into this space. And that's not just me. That's me working alongside the real rock stars who are doing the work. I was just helping. But that's my point, is that there's a time, and we were talking about this with children. Children are gems. They're precious little gems, and they have to be seen differently than the regular public. And we have to fight for that. We are required to fight for children. It's the only legitimate place to go with that discussion.
Yeah. And I think it comes up in your 10 lessons. But before we get to your lessons, I wanted to ask you, is there perhaps a lesson that you have learned in your life or in your career that you wish you would have learned when you were, let's say, 25 years old?
I wish I knew that I didn't need to be the smartest person in the room. Not that I ever was, but my mind told me that I needed to be like this prepared for this particular thing. I always walked into a room assuming I was going to learn something, but
Mhm.
I felt like I had to talk over people in order to get my position across versus listening. So I wish I had been a better listener when I was younger.
Was that related to, as a woman, nobody will listen to me? Or was it related to, I'm not as, can I say, smart as other people are, in your mind at least, that you didn't think you were good enough?
I think there's certainly a psychological part of not feeling good. And I was very self-deprecating when I was younger. You'd have to have a whole conversation with my husband about that, like not taking a compliment or understanding my intelligence or being told for a large part of my life that you probably can only do this because you're not good at that and all of this sort of thing. When you believe that, because that's really the only information you have coming to you. And what I realized as I went on, and this kind of plays into like the own hypocrisy of my own decisions, is that as I was told I was less, I wanted to do more. And then as I wanted to do more, I found that I thought I had to prove myself over and over again. And so that proving of oneself you can be overwhelming to people, right? Because you're talking as fast as you can to get as much information as you can before you get cut off, because you're used to being cut off and told that you have no right to have that conversation. And so when people would actually listen to me, I took full advantage, and poor things, I'm sure they regretted that moment of saying, "Oh, hey, tell me." But I think the strength of that, though, is that you grow. And
Yeah.
there are really the mentors in my life have been patient and kind and loving, have been very straightforward with me. So I can be quite blunt at times. So I have to temper that and make sure that how my bluntness comes across is still, it's like how I receive criticism. It's healthy criticism to help you be a better person, not to hurt you.
And it's
And
having the confidence, right? You stand
I,
behind your thoughts and
yes,
behind what you have to say.
I have no problems with confidence. That's never been an issue for me. I think I was overconfident at times and had premised my ideas around very confident people who were around me. And so instead of going that next step and doing the critical analysis of a particular thing because it moved me or I felt that was part of
Yeah.
my identity, you become very defensive when your identity is being put on the chopping block. And again, if I was to tell that 25-year-old girl, I was already having children and raising a family at that time. So you're very humbled when you have babies. There needs to be a lot more babies in the world. It's very humbling and chaotic and defines community. But what I found was that my younger son's autistic. So I had to advocate for him. And I'm so glad that in my younger years, as much as I wish I would have listened more, I'm glad I became an advocate early on because I never even thought about not advocating for him. It was a move of strength and agility and understanding the system at the time and not taking no from that, sir.
Yeah. Interesting, very powerful lesson right there. But let's take a look at your list of 10 lessons. Lesson number
Okay.
1, love boldly even when it's tough. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that one?
I think love is vulnerable. It shows vulnerability because you're opening yourself to complicated, chaotic,
Hmm.
heartbreakingly beautiful things. And I'm a songwriter too. And so I took a lot of the pain that I had and turned them into love songs. You flip them on their head. Just try and see what you learn from them. And kindness is not weakness. It's a strength actually to be able to see through the baloney and to be able to be powerful. And I think the real strength is when you love loudly, you give permission to others to love loudly too. And when it hurts, if you know it's coming from a place of love, if it's coming from a place of kindness, I think you're more open to taking that information. And if you're vulnerable enough to hear it, you can begin healing. And I would say the biggest lesson I learned in that was when my husband was recovering from alcoholism, is
Hmm.
that you have to be genuinely invested not only in their getting better because you can't fix them. They have to do that on their own, but in your own healing and you have to have agency to understand that you are enabling a person and that is oh my gosh, is probably the hardest thing I'd ever heard from people I didn't know because Al-Anon is anonymous, but families telling me basically to my face that I was part of the problem. And when you're sitting there as a spouse that's going, what? What do you mean I'm part? It was the hardest thing to hear and it hurts so much. And but once I unpacked it and I became vulnerable about it and I started sharing my experience with people, I didn't hide from them. And I was elected at the time. So you can imagine what that was like.
Oh, yeah.
But that vulnerability became a real strength and a growth opportunity.
But you had to process it first. It was not an automatic. You had
Oh
to.
my gosh, not even close. I was so offended and so hurt. Yeah.
And do you think in a next situation, and hopefully it doesn't happen like it happened before, would you then be prepared to deal with that situation, do you think?
I've actually already been through similar sort of thing in my own family and it never goes, there's never a, there's no recipe, right, for healing. And this last situation that I've been put in, I was so much stronger and better. And it was such a difficult decision, but I know it was the right one. And again, the universe, God, spirit, whatever you believe in, is so much more powerful if you give it the space to allow you to breathe. And this is something I told you before. I just don't breathe sometimes. I just jump from one thing to the other because I'm a happy, busy person. And that whole experience has reframed my entire perspective. I believe, and I mean, you'd have to ask people around me, but my interpretation of myself is that I'm a better human. I'm strategically better. I'm more accountable to my behavior and the things that I say. I think about how my words are going to impact. It doesn't mean I'm not going to be blunt, but I think ahead about, okay, how is a person going to interpret that? I have critical thinking about my own stuff. And I believe truly that I came out a better person than I went into it. And these last few weeks with some of the interesting things that happen with family, I think I've been able for the first time in my life not have to prove myself. And
Yeah,
that's very
very interesting.
powerful.
It is powerful. I appreciate that. Let's take a look at lesson number 2. Silence speaks volumes. That connects interesting with what we're just talking about.
Oh my goodness gracious. I think I put this one in there because I'm a lifelong learner. This is going to take me till when I'm dead, I'll be silent. That I wanted to defend myself. This plays into the first one, right? You just want to defend yourself. And my husband always says this statement. He always goes, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And I'm like, I want both, actually.
Yeah.
But proving yourself to be right is exhausting. And
Yeah.
you're not going to always be able to get everybody on board. And proving yourself right, there's places where that's necessary. And then there's other places where you just have to go, "Meh, okay, I don't need to be right to you. I'm right to me. I philosophically feel this in my whole being." And if you can get away from that sort of like super defensive space of having to defend yourself and speak up against the noise. And I'm so not good at this, but I'm saying it because it's something I am in the process of learning. But step back and listen, and you can be shown a whole new truth, right? That is very powerful. And in music, silence is as much of music as the sound is. It's reflective, it's a moment, it's done on purpose to reframe tone or space or a flow of ideas and thoughts. If you look at any of the great composers, their silences, the rests are just as important as the cantata or the symphony, right? For me, I mean, I look at this very personally. I can't speak for anybody else, but sleeping on it and finding clarity, that gives you a strength to move forward with grace instead of anger. And that's what I'm learning.
But let's say, as you indicated, you're learning, you're going through the process. Uh,
Yeah.
how can you learn or teach yourself to listen and not to speak? Is there an approach that you have to say, do this first or don't do that first? How do you approach it?
You're going to laugh. Are people going to actually see this or are they going to just be listening?
They're going to see it and listen.
Okay, this is what I do. When I go into and I just do this. This is my trick for being silent.
But do you literally apply that to yourself sometimes
I
when
do.
you say, yeah, okay.
I've been in rooms and people will be like, what do you want to say? I'm like, no, just listening. And I just put my head down and I refocus. But I have to physically like stop myself because I'm such a gabby girl. I love talking. I love sparkle and I love the drama of it. And I get so wound up and so energized by people in their cars. I just want to participate, right?
Oh, I can
But
tell. I can tell.
yeah, so I just do this.
But I like that lesson. Silence speaks volumes. And so this is
Yeah.
very appropriate. And there is a way, even if you use your hands to stay quiet.
So
No, I
true. And
like it.
people know, they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm not talking.
It's very honest for sure, but
Yeah.
I like it. Lesson number 3, you're not what happened to you. What do you mean with that?
You're not defined by your trauma. You're not defined by history will only repeat itself if you believe that that's the only thing that is valuable about you. If you're not willing to grow and to explore and to evolve, if you wear those wounds like a jacket or like a piece of a barrier, you're barring your entry to, and you underestimate yourself. And you have to write your own story to some degree. right? And that's where that real resilience comes from, is that ability to write your own story. And lots of people have tried to define me by my scars, by my mistakes. Lots, and it happens in family all the time. We all know what Christmas dinner can be like, right? Everybody brings up all the things like when you threw up at the table or you yelled at your sister, whatever, all of those memories. Instead of going back to that place of being defined as a 3-year-old at a table when you're 55, why not why not look at it by your growth as opposed to feeling like that's what they did to me? Like, I work a lot in with survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. And the thing that is profound to me every time is that not a single one of them want to be defined by their victimhood, even though they have every right. The victim part is the part that they're trying to deal with and move on, but to then survive and thrive. You
Yep.
are not your abuse. You are not your abuser. You're not any of the things that happen to get that for that situation to occur, to assume that you did something wrong or that any of those things, none of those are going to help with moving forward. And my goodness, the abuser would want nothing more than to see you be undermined every single day by the power that they held over you at that moment. That was the whole point, right? So you build I am what I am because I've built despite it. My scars are not a war wound that I wear. It's a part of the beautiful differentiation in my skin versus yours. Like, my favorite, when we were building a house at one time, I begged my husband for this crazy piece of granite. It was just a big old mess, and it had cracked and there'd been epoxy put into it and everything, but it was just such a magnificent piece of, I don't know, like, piece of history of out of the ground of this composite, right, that was put together. And I loved it so much because I could feel the bumps and the bruises and those things. And I have lots of scars because I rode motorbikes and I had dogs and all sorts of things. I'm just covered in scars. And I had 2 C-sections and a whole bunch of surgeries. So I got lots of scars. I had tattoos on my scars because I wanted to make them pretty. There's something that, so I'm not feeling like I'm looking at them all the time. But I think that putting a tattoo on a scar isn't removing the scar. It's evolving into something that is a piece of art, something that you can
Mhm.
appreciate, right? And it's a metaphor for me of, I'm not that thing. I'm choosing to build despite it.
Now, let me ask you, because you're not what happened to you. I can see if you think about bad things that happen to a person or negative things. But what if you're successful? If you are a successful politician in Canada, you're not what happened to you? I think that is a very positive experience in your life.
The idea is that if you carry victimization in your system, and again, for people, and everybody's trauma is different, right? But if that is what's defining you, then if you need to use that as part of your advocacy to
Yeah.
become in the, it's that, I think that's where you're going, is that your advocacy is built on the wounds that you hold. That's brilliant. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not you being defined by that. That is you being a powerhouse despite all of those things to try and get into the world and change history. That is refining yourself. That is redefining you. You're not staying stuck. You're not frozen with fear. You're not in a hole somewhere despite somebody trying to take away who you are or something, or losing somebody, whatever it is, whatever that is, it hasn't defined you. It's motivating
Yeah.
to flourish despite all of the things that could, like, literally throw you in a hole in the ground, and nobody would condemn you for that.
Makes sense. Lesson number 4, I think it flows into that very nicely. Lesson number 4, courage isn't always loud. What are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
It's sometimes getting out of bed, right? It really is. There's days where everything is so heavy and there are forces at play that are so far out of your control. And I remember this one time when my husband was in rehabilitation, and I was having discussions with my sons and trying to be a good mom and have discussions, but not undermine their father and all of it. And my husband and I are together now. He's my favorite person in the world, and I'm so proud of him. But at that time, it wasn't because I didn't love him. I loved him, but I wasn't in love with him. I wasn't in love with that
Must
person.
have been very tough. Must have been very tough.
It was. Anybody who's been through this will understand everything I'm saying right now. And I remember my poor son, my eldest, I was in the shower and I started to everything was like, I was just so heavy and I couldn't breathe. And so I came out of the shower and I fell on the floor and fainted.
Oh,
And
wow.
my son found me this way.
Wow.
And he threw a blanket over me and I don't remember, but he took me to my bed and put me to sleep and called one of my best friends to come over and sit with me. This kid is like 19. It's just an amazing kid. And he didn't know what to do. And I just realized like my body had just gone through so much at that point in time. And my friend didn't come. It's not my courage I'm talking about. I'm talking about hers and my son's. They didn't know what to do, but they had the courage to move forward and make those quiet choices. It's that, and telling me the truth about what was going on at that moment. Your heart is shattered, right? It's not, it doesn't have the capacity to move at that time and the courage and bravery of others to help put those pieces back together. They're telling you the truth when it costs you everything, right? Quiet choices that you're making when nobody's watching, right? Those are really brave moments. And again, it really fed my soul to continue to do the good thing. Even you're not going to get a hero cookie for doing the right thing, right? You're not going to suddenly be the pinnacle of a discussion or whatever. And when you're in public, right? It's always public. But the real strength, the real bravery is in those things that you do with purpose that are behind the scenes. And that is, it costs a lot. It costs you a lot, but it's
Yeah.
totally worth it.
Do you also connect that courage isn't always loud when it comes to human rights, speaking out for?
Yes and no. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right.
And yeah. If you look at the girls that have been cut through FGM, when I spoke with some of them and I was involved with some of the work that was being done across Canada, including a declaration, we did the very first one in my ministry in Alberta in North America. And that's a big deal. That's a loud one, right? But full of thousands and thousands of girls and everybody who came before me who had actually been subjected to that, who told their stories quietly to me and others to give us the motivation to fight on their behalf. That's the real courage. My ability to use my platform is the right thing to do. Again, no hero cookie there. That's just the right thing to do. And it was loud and it was proud and it was extremely valuable. But I would have had, there's no loudness in that courage. It's the quiet, beautiful, courageous little girls that are exposing themselves and potentially using, like losing family, like in a country where that's not, losing your family means that you're like on your own, right? We have to give that credit to them. And the loud people, like I have been on some sides of things, we're motivated by the people that do this very quiet, unbelievable work from behind.
Yeah, it's a very tough issue, human rights, and some people just don't have the chance, the ability to speak out. And if they would speak out, it can do major damage to them,
Yep.
their family members, the people around them. Yeah, that's a
Yes.
tough one. Courage isn't
And
always loud. It's an important lesson.
yeah.
Yeah. Lesson number 5, stay open to unexpected turns. Keep an open mind. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think too that how you say I'm so lucky and all of these kinds of things. Faith is such an important part of moving forward when you're fragile, right? The reason why we close doors sometimes is because the doors are slammed in our faces, but doors are slammed in your faces sometimes in order to help you be able to re-perceive and reconceive. And there's always a power move that's in there if you can see it,
Yeah.
right? And I'm not talking about like physical abuse or these kinds of things. It's different. I'm talking more of a philosophical perspective that the right people only showed up in my life when I least expected it. Like politics came into my life when I least expected it. The trajectory of my life wasn't luck. I was open to it. My heart was open, right? I was open to the idea of keeping good faith and keeping my door open basically for miracles
Yeah.
because I think I'm fairly competent and smart and I have a lot of really amazing things that I can talk about, but a lot of it wasn't me. I was led there. I was open to it. My mind was open enough to be led to a discussion that may not have happened if I had been closed off.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I like it. Stay open to unexpected turns. We're talking today with Leela Aheer, a well-known Canadian politician and a chief growth officer leading development of personalized training, nutrition, and recovery strategies, sharing her 10 lessons learned. Before we move on, we really appreciate your support, whether it is sharing our podcast with a friend, leaving a review, or checking out our affiliate partner Audible. Every bit helps us bring you the lessons that matter most. All right, moving on. Lesson number 6. Children teach us more than books. I like it. What are your thoughts?
I'm a natalist, so the more babies, the better. I mean, I've always tried to push for legislation and policy that builds community and family, right? Whatever your family looks like. And I'm not judging people's choices or anything, like one child, 10 kids, whatever. Or even if you're not having kids of your own, but you're in the mix of kids are chaotic. And if you can handle that kind of chaos and manage things at the knee level, right, and look at the world from that different perspective and be able to do that plus work, plus love, plus that's what we do when we're young parents, right? This is such a massive growth opportunity. And it's unconditional love and true patience and, seeing the world through the eyes of joy. I was telling you, like, I'm a joy seeker, like those small things, like those are great teaching moments. And I stand by that every day. I learn more from kiddos and actually animals too. I don't mean to combine humans and animals together, but there's just so much value in those experiences. And I just think when you're not experiencing that, but there's so many things that kids can't go to. I've never understood that. I just don't, unless you're having a really adult discussion where it could be something that maybe isn't the right thing for them to hear at that moment. But again, that's up to the family. The more I was so lucky, here I use that word again. I was very blessed in so many ways that the adults in my life were interested in this little girl. I had so many life experiences because adults actually took the time to ask me questions and to give me the patience in order to learn. So this was something I was able to give back to my kids and about 1,000 other kids, is just to listen to their descriptions of things. Their understanding, they're so smart. And for one at time, and oh my goodness, just takes your breath away.
Well, and of course, when we talk about children, we can think about little children and the energy, the creativity. It's amazing and it inspires many people, including myself. But then as children grow older and they go through school and perhaps get university education.
Be a teenager.
Be a teenager, yes. But even then, getting your education, hopefully, finding a job, finding a partner, having children, having grandchildren, all of that process is something that is obviously very inspiring to the older generation, the parents, the grandparents. And at the same time, sometimes I believe we forget that the future of our country, whichever country we live in, it's up to the next generation, right?
It is.
The future is in their hands. So we have to make sure that we provide as much information and support we can provide. They have to do it. And sometimes I think, and I'm getting a little into it in terms of politics, people who are in a job for decades, and it's like, hey, it's time to move on. We need new thinking, new people who understand better, new technologies, etc. But again, I'm curious about your thoughts as far as children growing older and the relevance. Maybe your children are still relatively young. It sounds like it.
Well, not really. They're 26 and 28.
Relatively
so,
young.
Relatively young. But I want grandchildren, and it's all about me. Let me tell you. Like, I am ready. And I work in longevity, right? And in health sciences and all of this space and looking at our lifespans and our health span and all of this kind of thing. And the one thing I learned and one thing I would share about this is that your desire to live longer and better is largely because there's a legacy that you want to have. Your grandchildren, even if they're like adopted, it doesn't matter. I have as many kids, right, or my friends' kids that are like my own, that I love them so deeply and they teach me so much. But the thing is that if you want to learn to be a good strategic partner, you need to help raise kids. There is no strategy like being a parent or being an auntie or being a best friend to a friend who has children and potentially being the confidant that your children will go to when they're teenagers or whatever. And it comes down to food in the house and it comes down to activities and conversations. And as an adult, acting like a kid, being able to dance with your children and play around or play football or get tackled or whatever it is. There's so much value in being in their space, in their, and I don't mean to say their level, because I don't mean to demean where a person is at in their life, especially because children are at their growth space. It's not, I don't mean to say that it's a better or worse thing. It's a mental shift that you have, that it's what unconditional love looks like. It has true patience. It feels, and you see the world through their eyes. And again, if you're going to be in service, if you're going to work in a space where you have to listen to people, you need to spend time with children.
I look forward to having this conversation with you in the future when
When I have
hopefully,
grandbabies.
I was going to say, because that's a whole new experience and
Oh, I can't wait.
it's wonderful, but it adds a new dimension to that. But we'll move to lesson number 7. Forgive to free yourself. What are your thoughts? I have a number of thoughts that come to my mind, but what are your thoughts with forgive to free yourself?
You either have to let go or you're going to be dragged
Okay.
in, right? Forgiveness isn't what it means. It's not me asking you for forgiveness is for me, not for you. If you choose to forgive me, that's up to you and that's your release of that. But my release is asking for it, because when you carry that bitterness, it just weighs you down. And I could talk about politics for the whole rest of the day with you about that whole part of it. But at some point in time, you just have to say, let's let it go. You have to be able to do that to move on. It doesn't mean you're not going to get triggered or stuff isn't going to bubble up. It will. But that bubbling up will get progressively more and more, what's the word I want to like, interesting, in the sense that it becomes a part of your healing versus
Yeah.
the part of the things that hold you back. Letting go of those things, there's like one of the most freeing things I've ever done for me. That's a total me thing, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I'm not good at doing me things. I'm good at being out and doing all the other people things. This for me is a very personal decision to let it go.
I like it. And as a matter of fact, when I was interviewed on 10 lessons learned, one of my favorite lessons is, not only was, get over it. And
Yes.
it,
Oh, preach.
and with that, also a good fit for our podcast, lessons learned, because you talk about forgive to free yourself. You learn things during that process. And maybe next time I need to be more sensitive or careful when I do this or that. Or I learned how to push back or how to get this done. And I'm going to do that again in the future. So forgive to free yourself. I think it's very important to give yourself the confidence, not to be stuck in a situation that didn't work out so well, because that's very much what we human beings tend to do. Is my brain goes back to it didn't work the last time, it's not going to work the next time. Hey, and it automatically happens in my brain because my boss told me every day, get over it. In a nice way, and not in a crude, rude manner, but in a positive way. Don't let it bother you. Time to move on and forgive to free yourself. I like that lesson.
Yeah. And it doesn't happen overnight. This is a process.
Oh yeah.
When somebody says get over it like at the wrong time, it just elongates the process. Like the person who's also telling you this information has to know the room and be thoughtful in their approach, right? There's a dignified mentality around giving people the time to process. And my husband processes way differently than I do. And even after we've been together for 30 years, I still sometimes forget about his process because I need an answer right now and he's got it process. And we become closer and better and more in love as we've both learned how to not push each other's buttons and to let things go and to really explore what's next versus what was in the past.
Yeah. And by the way, get over it. My boss told me that every day. I've also, over time, added the sentence, don't create mental barriers for yourself. That's a friendlier way of saying, hey, don't get stuck in things that are in the past.
Yeah.
You can no longer change the past. You got to move on, get over it, but in a nice way. Don't create mental barriers.
Exactly. No, it's perfect. I agree completely.
Yeah. Lesson number 8, purpose is built, not found. Please explain.
Purpose is, I used to think that this is where another contradiction comes in, that you're waiting for your calling, right? That something's going to just like trigger this response in you that you have this calling. And that your purpose is to build something like brick by brick and through action and service and showing up even when you're scared. And you're going to have missteps along the way, but the missteps actually help you. And you probably know this as much as anybody. You're building all of these things and nobody's even noticing that you're building. And then
Yeah.
you have to realize that, again, you're not doing it for a hero cookie. You're doing it because you're trying to build something that has longevity and has that legacy that you can also benefit from. The things
Yeah.
that I'm building nowadays may not benefit me personally in the sense that I won't be able to utilize those things, but that next generation will. And that has to be part of it. Like your purpose has to go outside. Like it may start within, but then God willing, we'll have a purpose that impacts even your small circle and then potentially larger than that because you inspire somebody else to pick up the mantle and do that too. So you can't wait for your purpose. You just can't wait. It's like having a long list of who you're going to marry, what they're going to look like, and having all this criteria. It's never going to happen. You have to adapt and be able to understand that your flaws and their flaws are actually going to be that granite. So I come back to that granite, that beautiful piece of flawed granite that is stronger because of the composite pieces that make it up.
Not sure if it's a fair question to ask, but what is your number one purpose? And maybe it's not a good question. I realized you have a lot of interests and things that you're working on, but is there one purpose that you say, that's right now my primary purpose?
Yeah, unify, to be kind and unify people. The world is broken apart right now. And I believe that my sole purpose is to unify.
Well said. Great answer. Great answer. I appreciate that. Okay, lesson number 9. Speak up or be defined by others. I think I agree with that. But when you talk about speak up, I remember lesson number 2, when you said silence speaks volumes, or lesson number 4, courage isn't always loud. So lesson number 9, speak up or be defined by others. Please share your thoughts with me.
So this is the symphony, right? This is if you don't speak, somebody else will, is like when you look at a symphony and how it's structured, like the A, B, A, B, A, B, the way that it's put together. And then you have these moments where the composer will take you on a journey through tone, through redefining like the main theme or the structure within the symphony. And it takes you to this other place and redefines the purpose of the symphony or how you are going to feel. And that's what this is about. It's about having a structure and then playing from within that structure to make sure that people understand that certain amounts of silence will give you growth and reflection, but other kinds of silence give power to others, right? And within that symphony, there's that tension, there's that play on that. And again, as we mature and understand and listen and talk to people, you'll have a better feeling of where you are in that space. Are you giving silence to people to empower them and push your own strength down? Or is the silence a powerful moment of reflection? And silencing somebody and being silent are two completely different things, right? They're not even in the same category. So the word is the same, but they mean completely different things. To be silenced is allowing somebody else to make decisions for you or taking your power, or that your story is being told by others without you being able to be part of that narrative and not wanting to rock the boat. And there's another type of silence where you're listening, you're paying attention, you're listening, and you're formulating. And then the other part is reflective, right? So you're being silent on purpose. You're being silent as a sign of respect and understanding, and then being silenced. That's completely different. So I think I think that's why there's conflict amongst that tension of silence, but there's also very defined pieces around that. So if I was to describe why this is important, that not fitting the mold, that's not allowing yourself to be silenced, or rocking the boat a little bit. Okay. Fair.
Now,
let's do it.
When you speak up, I think you also need to have confidence. You need to feel strong about your opinion and the fact that you want to share that. And perhaps, like in your case, I would imagine you have addressed large audiences, maybe hundreds of people. And we all know, especially when you're not used to it, walk up to the podium and there's your audience waiting to listen for you. That creates for many people, of course, a lot of pressure and saying, oh my gosh, am I going to say the right thing, etc. In your case, with so much experience, I imagine no problem. You can probably do it 10 minutes after our recording. How do you look at that? Sharing and speaking up in front of a very large audience, and you cannot just talk to one or two individuals. It's a few hundred people that you address.
Yeah, I've been so fortunate. When you're in public service, you get these great opportunities that not the average person. And I'm doing a TED Talk in October. So I'm really excited about that. Again, it's about reading the room. You can say a lot of things to a lot of people if it comes from a good place, right?
Yeah.
One thing that we're noticing now in our country in Canada, like with President Trump, and I'm not going to go into the political stuff, but the thing is that his rhetoric unified our country in a way that no leader has been able to do. And while I may not always appreciate all of the things that are being said and done, what I appreciate is that it opened the door to have the discussion and to, whether that was through vocal, we're not going to be the 51st state, everything from there to what's actually going on here. It shows that there's a weakness in our country that gave that opening for somebody like him to go say, oh, they're weak right now. Like, why not? Why not go after that weakness? And I honestly believe because we all spoke up in Canada from different perspectives. Like you heard things like elbows up or never and unifying Canada and who we are. And we might be polite, but we'll tell you we're going to get there, that kind of stuff, right? Like all of these things, we say please and thank you. We have all of these. We're a very diverse, multicultural culture that we've really delved into how cultures function together and how we can really appreciate and understand the differences. And so this is a cultural thing as well, too, that there's certain cultures where you have to be silenced. There's certain groups of people within a church or a mosque or a temple or whatever. There's certain things you can and can't say. There's respect factors that come into speaking to your elders. Like it's about picking your battles.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I think you say it very well as a politician, because it is sometimes tempting to push too hard and maybe offend or at least upset other people. And what I hear from you is you put it in a bigger perspective and say, hey, whatever comments were made, it unified the country. And you can explain in what way it did. I really appreciate that. And it maybe leads into lesson number 10. Gratitude is a game changer. And I'm very grateful, Leela, that you are a guest on 10 Lessons Learned. And with what you're sharing with us and with our audience, it may well become a game changer for many people. So thank you for that.
Oh my goodness.
But what are your thoughts with your lesson specifically here? Gratitude is a game changer.
Yeah, choosing gratitude is one of the hardest lessons because it's an act of rebellion. You're rebelling against a world that wants you to be angry and frustrated and divisive and powerful in that division. And what does that mean? And how do you climb the ladder based on that? But if you wake up every day and say thank you, and you refuse to let that bitterness win, that meant that feeling of gratitude becomes more of a habit. And it's that the darkness of the world can really easily steal your joy. And I don't know if a person is willing to take the time to tell me, maybe try this or do this, or I didn't like what you said there. I remember I was at one door, I was door knocking for a campaign. And this woman came, she goes, oh my God, I would never vote for you. Just leave my door kind of thing. And I said, okay. But I said, I'd really appreciate understanding like what it was that I said or what I did that offended you so much. And she was going on and on about this stuff. And I said, do you realize I didn't say that? They said, you said, and I said, yeah, people say I say a lot of things. And I said, but one thing I want you to realize is that my opinions are just that. As a public leader, as an elected official, my job is actually to act on behalf of my constituents and for the good things. But I said, if suddenly the constituency said slavery is good and we should go back to that, I said, I'm sorry, I'm going to fight you on that. And I said, some of the things that I'm fighting for may not be slavery, but in this day and age are just as powerful and just as serious in terms of how you feel empowered in the world. If you feel that you have autonomy, if you have identity, if you have independence, if you have freedom of speech, all of these things that really are important. but can be used for nefarious reasons. And so if you as a person believe in freedom of speech, then you should be applauding the fact that I used mine and that I was in the public and that you can talk to me about it. If you don't want to vote for me, that's fine. That's fair. That's your prerogative, right? We probably ideologically don't agree. But to try and stomp on my capacity to have the freedom to speak goes against everything that I believe in. And so I was really grateful for that conversation because I was calm. I was really thoughtful. So was she, actually. I mean, her tone totally changed about 10 minutes or so into the conversation. And usually at doors, we're there like 3 to 5 minutes maximum. But I was there probably at that door, I'm guessing for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, having a very deep conversation. And like I said, I don't know if she would ever vote for me, but that was irrelevant. You gain respect and a friendship and a deeper understanding of each other, and that it's okay to disagree. And that act of rebellion is so powerful. To be grateful is so powerful.
And I think it could be that person where he or she may have a different opinion, but that person may well appreciate the fact that you were open to have a conversation. And even if you have a different opinion, it doesn't mean that you have to argue and say, I don't like you. No, different opinions, that's who we are as people. And we need to respect that. Don't have to agree with different opinions than our own, but at the same time, let's have a conversation. And showing that level of gratitude, sometimes in a very subtle way, is not in a presentation. Oh, I want to thank you very. No, it could be, hey, I appreciate what you're doing and I understand what you're saying. Maybe that's it. But I like that. It's powerful and it shows perhaps an element of humility about ourselves to say, hey, even if we have a different opinion, I appreciate who you are and what you're saying, even if I don't agree. But that's who we are as people. We carry our opinions with us. And yes, it's easy to disagree. Believe me, I can do that. But at the same time, showing respect and gratitude, I really like that.
And you spoke about humility, right? Humility is such an act of courage. It's that silent act of courage, right? Humility is one of those things that's such a driver. I'm so glad you brought that up because I meant to say that in that silent act. But it also can be such a driver of gratitude because you're entering every room with that sense of, okay, what am I going to learn here? What am I going to understand? What does the room look like when I speak to these folks? How do I make them realize that I'm seeing them, that I get them, right? This is super important. I'm so glad you brought that up. It's a really important point.
Yeah, and it's something that I think about myself sometimes. If I think about my career and different countries where I've lived, I think back of some of the people that I met in whatever capacity, not necessarily the leaders only and the boss here, but just the human beings. And they still show up in my brain from time to time because it's like, wow, that was such a nice moment. And I want to ask you, Leela, is there perhaps a lesson that you have unlearned in your life or in your career where you said, I got to do it differently?
Oh gosh, there's probably about 100. Yeah, but I think I unlearned bitterness and frustration and division. I'm a highly competitive person, and that's good and it's bad. The virtue of being highly competitive is that you're going to get a person that hustles all the time. I work really hard to get things done and to improving myself all the time. But there's also a great deal of negativity that can come from that if you can't unpack it and look at it. So when you lose, you never lose, you never fail. It's a growth opportunity. But when you lose, that you can smile through that and learn from it versus being angry and resentful about that. And I'm again, lifelong learner, but this is something I work on all the time, is to let that stuff go and to be able to be thoughtful in my approach when I might not be doing as well as I'd like to.
And to carry that over to the people around you and obviously family members. It's not only what happens in your own brain, but it's happened to the people around you and how you can help them go through their challenges, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly.
Very well
and
said.
Go through it with grace. And it's not going to be perfect. I have days where I just break down. I just don't have the capacity to do this stuff. And sometimes I just have to sleep. But the truth is that for every person that I've been there for them at that time when that division and stuff is sneaking in there, they're there to lift me up on my rough days too. And that's the really sequential benefit to unlearning bad habits, is that other people see you lead by example. And the most wonderful things happen when people feel like they have the energy and capacity and the authority to be able to step in and help you when you're having a bad day.
Well, this is great. I want to thank you, Leela, for joining us today and for sharing your lessons of wisdom with our global audience. It's much appreciated. You've been listening to our international program, 10 Lessons Learned. And this episode is produced by Robert Hossery. And as always, we are supported by the Professional Development Forum. I also want to give my special thanks to our amazing team, Yi Wang, who manages our marketing and social media, and Cody Como, our episode editor. Our guest today is the Honorable Leela Aheer, a well-known Canadian politician and a Chief Growth Officer leading development and personalized training, nutrition, and recovery strategies, sharing her 10 lessons learned. And to our audience, don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss a lesson that could change your life and perhaps your career. Thank you for tuning in to 10 Lessons Learned, where we're making the world a little wiser, one lesson at a time. Thank you, and stay safe.